Hey, welcome to Church Online today. Man, we're so glad you're joining with us today. Man, we hope that you will share this right now. Man, get the word out and give us some likes, give us some hearts. Those are amens and ways that you can participate and engage in our services today. Well, this week was a great week for me because I got my hair cut this week because I saw all of your comments online about me looking like Sylvester Stallone, Chia Pet. I got them all. So this week I decided to get my hair cut, so I feel 10 pounds lighter. And you know, it's crazy kind of what hairstyles are going to do right now. I mean, whenever your wife is cutting your hair, when your husband's cutting hair, I don't know if any of your husbands are cutting hair or not, but I'm seeing all these pictures on Facebook right now about post your senior pictures in light of seniors right now. And I think that some of us are going to look back 15 years from now and see some of these coronavirus haircuts, and we're going to get some good laughs in the future. I saw this online in China, how they are cutting hair today. So watch this video. Now, I have a feeling that's what our future could look like in the next few months if we continue on in this season. Either that or we're going to have some really, really bad hairstyles. Listen, if you're sitting next to someone right now that needs a haircut, just look at them right now, right in the eyes, and just tell them, say, you need a haircut. You need a haircut. Now, speaking of bad haircuts, it kind of leads into my message today. We're going to tackle this age-old question of why do bad things happen to good people? And this is a question that's been around for a long time. Why does God allow evil, suffering, and pain? Why does God allow the coronavirus? We're in this series right now called The Problem of God, and we're tackling this difficult question today. And as we look on the news and as we see over 100,000 people that have died because of the coronavirus, we have to ask ourselves, God, why would you allow that to happen? God, if you're a good God, why are so many people getting sick? God, if you are a good God, why do children die? If you are a good God, then why is there sex trafficking? God, I don't understand. Why does God allow evil, suffering, and pain? You know, some of you right now don't understand because you're going through some suffering right now, and you can't understand why your neighbor is celebrating because they got a $3,400 stimulus check that is going to provide them a better vacation. And you're saying, why, God? Why am I going through this suffering? I don't understand it. I don't get it. Now, this is a question that goes way, 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 way back to the very beginning. And if you look at the very first book in the Bible, is called the book of Job. Now, if you open up the Bible, you're going to see Genesis is the first book, but the Bible isn't written chronologically. The very first book of the Bible was Job. It was written 2,000 years before Jesus. And the whole book of Job is answering this question, why does God allow evil, suffering, and pain? Now, if that book was written 2,000 years before Jesus, humanity has been struggling with this question for over 4,000 years. And personally, I've been struggling with this question for 43 years. Now, maybe the first few years don't count, but I've often wondered, God, why? I don't get it. I remember July 2018 when I found out that I had a biological father. I remember going through some pain and wrestling and finding out about him after 40 some years and walking through that and saying, God, why? I don't understand this. I currently have a friend of mine who is a pastor who has the coronavirus, who's been in a hospital. And I say, God, why? I don't understand this. And even as I talk to people in our church that have left jobs, I've talked to many of you that have lost your jobs or are going through suffering and pain, going through health challenges, going through relational challenges. We can't help but sometimes ask this question, God, why? I don't understand it. What's happening here? And you could share your story as well today. Stories of feeling grief and suffering and pain. And we could give a pretty quick response as far as a quick answer. I like what the great theologian Kelly Clarkson and Kanye West said. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And in one hand, that is true. That pain, it makes us stronger. And pain can make us better. But I've recognized that when people go through pain, they either get better or they get bitter. And how do we walk through pain without getting bitter? I want to introduce you to a man in the Old Testament by the name of Habakkuk. Would you just say that with me right now? Just say Habakkuk. Look at the person next to you. If you're with somebody right now, just say Habakkuk. If you're alone, just say it by yourself. Just say Habakkuk. Now, one of the beauties of being online right now and not in person is because when I'm preaching here in person, if you're sitting in the front row and I say some words like Habakkuk, then I can just sometimes spit. They call like the first couple rows the splash zone. So now that you're home, you don't have to worry about the splash zone. But this word Habakkuk, this name Habakkuk, it means to embrace and to wrestle. I think those are fascinating. That's a fascinating combination of words. To wrestle with God and to embrace God. And I've found in my own spiritual journey, oftentimes, that I found myself right there in this Habakkuk season of embracing and wrestling. This past week, when I heard our governor, Gavin Newsom, talk about large group gatherings, not meeting together until as late as this fall, not meeting through the month of July and August. I embraced God, I wrestled with God, and I also embraced him, saying, God, I don't understand what you're doing right now. I don't get it. Help me understand. Now, Habakkuk, he lived during this time when there was this great king named Josiah. And Josiah, man, he was a God-chasing man. He was a God-fearing man. And he led the country with character and integrity and wisdom from God. And Josiah was on a mission to see people find and follow God. But Josiah died. And they entered into a new season under a new ruler named King Jehoiakim. And King Jehoiakim was an evil king. Just say boo. Just say bad. He was a bad, evil king. And King Jehoiakim began to start this crazy cycle. And people began to go the world's way instead of God's way. And Habakkuk, who was this God-fearing man, began to look at his society. He began to look at what was happening around him. And he began to say, God, this isn't right. Now listen to what Habakkuk said in Habakkuk chapter 1 and verse 2 through 4. He said, how long, O Lord, must I call for help? You ever feel like that? God, I keep calling out, I keep crying out for help, but you do not listen. Violence is everywhere, I cry, but you don't come to save. Must I forever see these evil deeds? Why must I watch all of this misery, this suffering, this pain? Wherever I look, I see destruction. I see violence. I'm surrounded by people who love to argue and fight. He says, the law, your word, God, your message has been paralyzed, and there's no justice in the courts. The wicked far outnumber the righteous, so that justice has become perverted. This is his way of saying, God, I don't get it. Why are you allowing evil, suffering, and pain, God? This was a question that he had. This was an inquiry. It was a request back to God. And it disturbed Habakkuk. He said, God, do something about this. God, you've got to do something. And here's God's response. Look at verse 5. God responds back to Habakkuk, and the Lord replied, look around at the nations, he says. Look and be amazed, for I'm doing something in your own day. God says, I'm on the move. I've got a purpose. I have a plan. Something you wouldn't believe, even if someone told you about it. Now, this is sounding good. Like God says, I've got a purpose and a plan. Then God shifts gears, and here's what he says. I'm raising up the Babylonians, a cruel and violent people. They're going to march across the world, conquer other lands. They're notorious for their cruelty and do whatever they like. Their horses, they're swifter than cheetahs and fiercer than wolves at dusk. Their charioteers charge from far away like eagles. They swoop down to devour their prey. Now catch this. Habakkuk says, God, do something. And God responds back, I'm about to move. I'm going on the move. And here's what's going to happen is the Babylonians are going to come and they're going to destroy the land. They're going to conquer. They're going to take you out. That makes no sense. Habakkuk is probably saying, God, listen, that's worse than not answering my prayer. God, that's going the exact opposite of where I want you to go. God, forget I even asked. Have you ever had a prayer that you prayed and God didn't answer it like you thought that he would? I know I have. I prayed prayers before, and I prayed in faith. I remember a few years ago, I had a good friend of mine from the gym that we worked out together. And man, he was just a good dude, had a couple young kids. And man, we would hang out. We would go out to eat. We would go to some games together. And we just had a good time together. And he got cancer. And I remember praying, God, heal him. I remember praying in faith, God, heal him. And he died. And I did his funeral. I'm saying, God, I don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense. God, well, why do you allow evil, suffering, and pain? Now, look at verse 12 and verse 13, because this is Habakkuk's response back. He says, O Lord, my God, my Holy One, you who are eternal, surely you don't plan to wipe us out. O Lord, our rock, you've sent these Babylonians to correct us, to punish us for our many sins. You're pure. You can't stand the sight of evil. Will you wink at their treachery? Should you be silent while they wicked swallow up people more righteous than they? This is Habakkuk's, what the heck, God? I don't get this. I don't understand. And one of the first things that I want you to recognize about when you begin to go through suffering and pain, and when you go through doubt, and when you go through things that you don't understand, it's okay to question God. It's okay to bring your questions and bring your inquiry. And it's okay to say, God, I don't get it. I don't understand. Jesus did. Did you know that Jesus, he went to the Garden of Gethsemane before he was about to go to the cross? He knew he was going to go to the cross. He knew that he was going to go through suffering and pain. And he was about to go through betrayal. I saw this meme last week with Judas, and it's a picture that said, Jesus is talking to 12 disciples. One of you will betray me. He's putting it on a text message. Peter says, not me, Lord. Who? And then it says, Judas Iscariot left the group. It's like, I'm out of here. I'm gone. You know, Jesus went through the Garden of Gethsemane knowing he was about to be betrayed. Have you ever been betrayed? Have you ever been let down before? Have you ever gone through suffering and pain, knowing that you've got this intense pain that you're in the middle of, this storm that you're going through? Jesus did. And Jesus said, God, please take this suffering away from me. I don't want to go through it. It doesn't make sense. Take it away. But then he pivoted. And here's what Jesus said. But God, not my will, but your will be done. Not my will, God, but your will. See, there's a difference between doubt and unbelief. See, doubt is whenever you come to God with your questions, when there's uncertainty, when you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Doubt is, I'm still coming to you, God. I'm wrestling with you. Habakkuk, to wrestle and embrace. I'm wrestling, I'm embracing. God, help me in this season of doubt. But unbelief is when you walk away from God. It's okay to wrestle. It's okay to embrace. Jesus said, your will, not my will. You know, there have been times in my life when I've said, God, I don't understand it. I don't get it. I remember when I was a youth pastor in Oklahoma, and we had this beautiful girl in our youth ministry. Her name was Lana, and she was 15 years old, and she was a golfer and played on the golf team, and she was sold out to her faith and very much on fire for Jesus. And this 15-year-old girl was going to her golf tournament that day, and her father, who was also just a God-fearing man, a man of character, integrity, a loving man, a man that served in our church, he took time off of work to go see his daughter play golf. And as he was following that school bus that day, there was another man that was coming down the highway, and he crossed the no passing zone, the no passing lane. And there was a head-on collision that killed our friend. Whenever the police reported back to the mom, Lana was still on the golf course. She was still in her tournament, wondering why her dad was running so late. And when the police called her mother to tell her what happened, her mother called Shannon and I and asked us to go to that tournament that day and to walk across those greens and to tell this 15-year-old beautiful girl that her dad had died. And I remember after the experience that day, saying, God, I don't get it. I do not understand. There have been times in my life where I feel like that I'm embracing God, I'm wrestling with God, and sometimes I feel like I'm fighting God. But I'm not really fighting him. Maybe a better picture is I'm beating on his chest. But in a gentle invitation, he's saying, it's okay. I can take it. We go through these seasons that we don't understand when we say, God, why? We're in one of those seasons right now as a country. We say, God, why? Why is this happening? I don't get it. I don't understand. And God's saying, it's okay. Bring it. Bring it to me. And we don't always get this why answered. And so many of us that are logical, we want a logical response back to a logical question. Sometimes God will give it to you, but sometimes God speaks with emotion into our heart. Habakkuk chapter 2 and verse 1, Habakkuk says, I will climb up to my watchtower. I'm going to stand at my guard post, and I'm going to wait to see what the Lord says, how he's going to answer my complaint. He says, then the Lord said to me, write my answer plainly on tablets. Listen, now is the time to pray. Now is the time to go to God and say, God, speak to me. He says, so that a runner can carry the correct message to others, the vision is for a future time. It describes the end. God says, it will be fulfilled. I have a purpose and a plan that will be fulfilled in this. And if it seems slow in coming, wait patiently. If it seems slow in coming, maybe right now you're praying for something, you don't understand something, you're asking God, you don't get it. He says, wait patiently, for his purpose and his plan will surely take place. It will not be delayed. I tell you, God has a purpose and a plan for you right now. It is a purpose and a plan to prosper you, to give you a hope, to give you a future. Habakkuk, after he hears this response from God, he worships. He sings this song. He writes these lyrics down. It's a prayer, but it's a worship song. And I want you to hear these lyrics in Habakkuk chapter 3. This prayer was sung by the prophet Habakkuk. He said, I've heard all about you, Lord. I'm filled with awe by your amazing works. And in this time of our deep need, help us again as you did in years gone by. And in your anger, remember your mercy. He goes on, he says in verse 17 of Habakkuk chapter 3, he says, even though the fig trees have no blossoms, even though there are no grapes on the vines, even though the olive crop fails and the fields lie empty and barren, even though the flocks die in the fields and the cattle barns are empty, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in the God of my salvation. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes me as sure-footed as a deer and able to tread upon the heights. What a beautiful song. It says this prayer is to be accompanied by stringed instruments. Bring out the guitars, he says. This is a beautiful worship song. So here's a couple things that I learned. If you find yourself saying, God, why? Why are you allowing this suffering to happen in my life right now? I think that we can learn first and foremost what Habakkuk said. Help us again as you did in years gone by. This can be your prayer today. You might write this prayer down. When you wake up in the morning, you might pray this prayer before your feet even hit the floor. God, help us again as you did in years gone by. Will you remember what God has done for you in the past? Will you remember the time that he's got you through? I can think of so many times when God got me through. I remember whenever I was 18 years old and my parents dropped me off at college and my parents didn't have any money at all. And my dad gave me a $100 bill. It's all he had and a tank of gas. And he left. And you know what? God got me through. He helped me through that time. I remember going through, grief of losing some family members that I loved. And you know what? God, he got me through. I remember trying to get into this building and how difficult that was going to be. And guess what? God, he got me through. And you can think about stories in your past where God has got you through, and you pray this prayer, God, help me as you have in years gone by. For some of you, you may not be a believer. You may not be a follower of Jesus Christ. You say, I don't have anything to go back on. I don't have anything recorded. Do this for me right now. Just breathe. Just go like this. Would you just do that with me? If you have breath in your lungs, may I remind you that came from God. God gave you that. Can I tell you that God, he put us in this world and he positioned us in this world at just the right place, at just the right time. The world is spinning so that we don't get too close to the sun and burn, so we don't get too far away and freeze. God has done that. And maybe for some of you, you don't have anything in your memory bank. What you need to do is rely upon the faith of other people. When I'm going to buy something, I look at the reviews. I go to Google, look at the reviews. I go to Amazon, look at the reviews. If I'm going to a restaurant, I go to Yelp and look at the reviews. And you know what I do? I borrow the faith and the experience of other people to help me make my decisions. Maybe some of you are thinking about God right now. And you can look at other people that are maybe in the same room with you right now watching this. You can think about other people that have drawn you to watch this experience right now. I don't think it's by accident. God brought you here, and you can look at their faith and say, I'm going to read their reviews of where their faith is. I want some of that. Second thing that I learned from him is this. He says in verse 18, be joyful in God of my salvation. That in this season and time, I'm going to be joyful in the God of my salvation. I'm going to experience joy. Every puzzle piece, every puzzle has a dark piece. It has a dark piece of the puzzle. And if you stare at that dark piece, you will never finish and complete the puzzle. What you've got to do is you've got to focus on the big picture. And right now, in the middle of what we're in, you've got to focus on the big picture, because if you focus on just that dark piece of the puzzle, you won't be able to get to the future. I believe now is the time for us to say, God, I'm going to be joyful in the God of my salvation. And I'm not going to allow this season to rob me of my joy. And the third thing that he did is this. He says in verse 19, the sovereign Lord is my strength. And you might just tell yourself, listen, the sovereign Lord is my strength right now. When you're going through a difficult day and you're filled with fear, anxiety, uncertainty, just say, the sovereign Lord is my strength. So there it is. We've covered all the bases, right? Actually, we've just heard one man's experience, Habakkuk, to embrace God and to wrestle with God. And I'll leave you with this. There's the bookends of Scripture. We start with the book of Genesis, and in Genesis chapter 3 is when suffering entered the world. And then we end with Revelation chapter 21, where God says, I will take away all your pain and suffering. I will wipe every tear from your eyes. We start here, we go here. And what I want to tell you today is this. is that we're living in the in-between right now. And when in this land of in-between, in this season of in-between where suffering began and where it's going to be taken away, in this in-between time, will you muster up the courage to learn from Habakkuk? And I'm going to give you a crawl, walk, run. The crawl is this. For some of you, you just say, God, help me again as you did in years gone past. That's your prayer. God, help me again as you did in years gone past. For some of you, that may be as far as you can go right now. But some of you may be able to take a next step. And you move from a crawl into a walk. And you say, God, not only help us again as you have in years gone past, but God, I'm going to be joyful. I'm going to be joyful in the God of my salvation. In this season where I don't understand, I choose joy. Maybe some of you will go all the way there. The crawl, the walk, and the run. And the run is this, when you say, God, you are the sovereign Lord, and you are my strength.